So today our guest is somebody who I've really been looking forward to having here, Howard Herring. And Howard is, I've known Howard for quite a long time. And Howard began his career as a pianist. And I believe you played in a chamber music ensemble, if I have that right. And you went to the Caramore Festival, music festival, in 1986. You were there for about 15 years, started the Rising Stars program there, before going to New World in 2001, where you've now been there the same amount of time that you were actually in Caramore, 15 years. And during your time at New World, you have, I think, in many ways really revitalized it, you know, after its start, of course. It's now been ongoing for about close to 28 years. Thank you. And of course, you oversaw the fabulous building project, which I know you'll talk a little bit about, the Frank Gehry building, the New World Center, which is our Peabody National Advisory Council actually held a meeting down there, graciously hosted by Howard and his folks, and it's a spectacular place, so I know we'll get a chance to talk a little bit more about that. I guess the best place to start is this whole question a little bit about what the mission of New World is, and this is somewhat of a leading question because it gets us into our topic, the evolution of that mission over 30 years and how that focus has, I mean, in some ways it's very core to what it started as, but it's also really evolved in significant ways, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
So, as a written statement, our mission is to train leaders. We say that we're going to focus our attention on graduates of distinguished music schools, and we're going to train them for leadership in the art form that is ours, music. The word leader has become ever more important, and we lean on it when we read that statement, or when we think about that statement, we think about the dimensions of leadership, which were pretty simple in the early days. It was about playing well, and it was about moving through the transition into professional life. So while our fellows are with us for up to 3 years, we're not degree granting. Our job is to fill the space between formal academic life and professional. So leadership was about playing, and as the environment for making music has evolved in this country, in fact around the world, we have broadened our understanding of leadership in some very important ways, we think very important ways. We also accompany the mission statement with a vision statement, and we say that we believe in a strong and secure future for classical music, and that we will reaffirm, reimagine, express, and share it with as many people as possible. And that last phrase, with as many people as possible, is something that has led us into some remarkable relationships in the Miami community and globally in a digital sense. So leadership is first and foremost playing well, but it's also understanding how to lead inside an orchestra and how to lead in a community. It has to do with how you represent the art form from the stage, in a classroom, in the atrium, with patrons, with ticket buyers, how you speak about the art form and cause people to be curious and want to come and listen to this music. So we drive it back to leadership, but it's expanded a great deal.
So it's really interesting because you are, I think one of the things that I've observed coming from the professional world and now working in a university, in a conservatory within a university, is that schools have not traditionally thought of themselves as being in the audience development business. Mm-hmm. But in reality, when we talk about the future for classical music, you know, if you're going to change and expand your audiences, you have to change who's on the stages of your performing arts organizations. And if you're going to change that, you have to change who's in your school and the way folks that come through these schools think about the profession. And so, you know, one of the things we talk about here, or starting to talk more about here, is that we are in the audience development business. And that's very clearly what I hear you saying when you talk about this.
Oh, this is bedrock for us. Mm-hmm. I'm liable to talk for 3 hours about this, so stop me.
Okay, talk a little bit about it, and then I will, but please.
So the audience in the United States for classical music has been drifting downward for some time. And we know this from a good bit of statistical work that's been done. In 1980, the US Census, for the very first time, asked if you had been to a classical music concert in the prior year. So in 82, when they published those results, 13% of the American population said that they'd been to at least one classical music concert in the prior year. And the last time we took a census, in 2010, and it came out in 12, we were down to 8%. And what's interesting, if you go back and chart that, it's not spike and dive, it's this gentle fall. Mm-hmm. So does 8 become 7? Does it become 6? Could it become 9? I don't know. The Knight Foundation ran a program called The Magic of Music. This is now 15 years ago, and in The Magic of Music, they focused on 12 cities in the United States, all of them Knight Foundation, Knight newspaper cities. So it was Philadelphia, Wichita, Kansas, Fort Wayne, Indiana. It was a crazy, wonderful mix. Detroit was in there. It was large and small and middle-sized cities and orchestras serving those cities. And one of the findings was that the determination was that about 25% of the population of those cities were predisposed to go to classical music. But in fact, they were down in that 3, 4, 5% range. So the question that we're asking from afar, from statistical analysis, is how do you turn 8% upward? How do you go from, even if you're at 8% of your population, how do you go to 25%? Mm-hmm. But the deeper question is, how do you get your musicians ready to deal with an audience that is disappearing? And first of all, they must realize it, and second of all, learn the skills that take them there. Mm-hmm. And that is something that is high value for us. So to talk just briefly about the programs themselves, I'm going back to representing the art form, and Doug and Angela will talk about this a little bit later, but how you speak to an audience from the stage, how you talk to someone in the atrium mm-hmm. after the performance is over, how you represent yourself and the art form online, all that's just skills that are being developed. Meanwhile, we have chosen 6 weekends a year, and we stage 3 alternate performance formats on those, 2 per format, each format twice over 6 weeks of the season. And we have adjusted start times, and we've adjusted durations, and we have created new experiences. Experience is the key word. In one case, it's a 1-hour narrated performance with a second part, which is the orchestra in the atrium with the audience talking further about what's just happened. In another case, and Baltimore Symphony is doing this now, they used our word pulse. Mm-hmm. Pulse, late night at the New World Symphony. DJ mix at 9, orchestra set at about 10:20, second orchestra set at about 11:15, midnight chamber music in a very quiet space. So it's DJ and orchestra alternating, and then the party continues in the big hall, and some of us retire to the chamber music space and listen to chamber music in the quiet. And then a third, which is this year for the first time, driven by the fellows. The fellows choose an audience, they build the experience, they put the music and uncompromised in the middle of that experience. Then we market, execute, and we are surveying all these audiences. I can go on forever, but we're talking about high percentages of new to the database. We're talking about high percentages of inclusion across the population, and certainly a much younger audience. So we're making it work in the specific because we find that an experiential curriculum is important, but we're also forming patterns that are being picked up by other orchestras.
So I want to talk a little bit we'll talk about the audience, because I think, it goes to the core of this conversation about the fact that, I think the traditional way that orchestras, not just orchestras, performing arts organizations, thought about audience development is, if we introduce people in the right way and we bring them along, they will come to like what we do. And that's different from, we're going to meet the audience on its own terms. Very different conversation.
Absolutely.
So I want to come back to that, but before we did, you talked about leadership, which I think is a fabulous word to use with regard to training students. But get a little bit more granular. So what does that translate to in terms of the skills? We know they're working on their ensemble skills. They're doing all that stuff that we would expect them to do. What else are they doing when they come through that program?
So I'll use Doug Rosenthal as my example. The New World Symphony used to play in the Lincoln Theater, which was on Lincoln Road in Miami Beach. So how many people have been to Lincoln Road? Ooh, not enough. But you'll get there eventually. About 10 million people walk Lincoln Road in a given year. And we were doing our first work in a movie theater that was renovated for the new World Symphony. And it opened right onto the street. So one of our first experiments with these alternate performance formats was 30-minute performances. We do 7:30, 8:30, and 9:30, and it was a different program each time. It was $2.50. So we were buying email addresses. We were buying access, and we knew that. But we would hit the street at around 6:45 in front of the 7:30, the first performance. And when I say we, I mean the marketing department and a handful of fellows, 5, 6, 8, or 10 fellows, and myself. And we had 3x5 cards, and we would go out and we would meet the audience who were walking Lincoln Road. They were strolling this beautiful Miami Beach evening, and we would just look them in the eye and say, it's 2:50, Mozart at 7:30, Brahms at 8:30, Stravinsky at 9:30. Why don't you give it a try? And you'd be amazed. We could put 300 or 400 people in the Lincoln Theater in a 45-minute period with just that form of engagement. Now, if you're a musician and you all of a sudden, maybe it sounds like we were out there as carnival barkers. Kind of we were, except there was no compromise in the presentation of the music, and there was no compromise, or there was only invitation and goodwill in our speaking to the audience. So it was, in my opinion, quite pure. Come try us. And we could get them to do it. So and Doug was always with us as we were running those experiments. It's one tiny example, but the idea is that you feel comfortable looking somebody in the eye and saying, I think you're going to like this. And having an experience that might line up with their lifestyle. And if you can put those two together, then you've got something.
Yeah, and I think that is, coming to the audience question is that, and you obviously have experimented with a lot of different formats, and of course professional orchestras are doing that today as well. But I think it is one of the things that I certainly learned from being in the business is that in the case when I was with the St. Louis Symphony, one person's experience with the St. Louis Symphony might be, a film with the orchestra, and another person's experience is a Mahler Symphony. And they're not two unequal experiences. They're both equally valid experiences.
That's right.
And I think, so how do you, look, we've got musicians here, and this is a field that, I'm a trained musician, you're a trained musician. We went to school in the old days, so we know what the training was about, right? And to a large extent still is today in our major music schools, and it's one of the reasons that we're talking a lot about this issue here at Peabody now. How do you change the culture of that for young musicians, and for our faculty? Because I think to me it's about culture change.
Yes.
And how do you get people to think that this is not just valid but essential?
So the stats that I gave you at the top, sometimes our incoming fellows, our first years, they'll get wide-eyed when you give them those stats. Sometimes it doesn't penetrate. I think so fear doesn't work. We know that from our presidential campaign, right? Fear doesn't work. Yeah. It's so clear. It's not about fear. It's about understanding how you share. We are all driven to share this music. That's why I get up in the morning. So if you're driven to share it, then how will you step out and find others who probably don't know about it yet, but you're confident that if you share it at the highest levels of performance, they're going to become part of you. And if you then, one of the most effective techniques we use is we look for analogous circumstances. So every first year at New World has played video games. Right? So when you played your first video game, how did that work? Well, the video guys are really clever about this. They know about onboarding. Craig Hall, who is our head of our marketing and public relations, he gives this incredible statement. to the first years about, okay, go back and reflect. This is how you were onboarded. You didn't know it, but they just pulled you in incrementally and you were theirs. If you then apply that to music and you say that a 30-minute performance or a late night performance or something with a movie is going to be that first step, then you don't know what the end result is, but you've got to onboard. You cannot take someone, this group here, we wouldn't give you an enormous novel in a foreign language and say, here, go do it, right? We wouldn't give this group War and Peace in Russian and ask them to come back in a week with anything coherent to say about it. Same story with music. So how we teach our first years and then the experience for the 3 years of the fellowship about that onboarding process is a key piece.
Let me ask you a question. Can anybody come through your program successfully today, and this is another way of getting at the question, can anybody come through your program today and just play and be successful at New World? Or is that not possible anymore?
I'm looking at my guys.
Yeah, we're gonna be joined in a few minutes by a couple of alum, actually, of New World and members of professional orchestras today.
So you might be able to hide out. You might get through 3 years and never talk to someone in the audience, but I can't imagine it. In part because you're kind of, I think our fellows are kind of swept up by the energy of it. But we are relentless. Mm-hmm. We talk about this all the time. We talk about them being colleagues inside the orchestra and what that means, what they bring to that experience. And then you talk about community. Mm-hmm. And it's the same relationship. Mm-hmm. You've got to want to share, and you've got to want to engage. And so I don't think you could do it, no. I say no.
Yeah. Well, maybe this is probably a good time to bring up. Let's bring up our fellows. So I will introduce them. We have Angela Lee. Angela is the assistant principal second in the Baltimore Symphony. Have a seat, Angela. And a familiar face for those of you that go to the Baltimore Symphony. And then over here we have, to my left, we have Douglas Rosenthal. Doug is the assistant principal trombone of the Kennedy Center Opera House Orchestra. So two obviously successful alum of New World. And so, we've been talking a little bit here. Maybe you all can jump in and talk a little bit about your experiences, and I have some specific questions about life in professional orchestras today, and as it intersects with the kinds of things we're talking about. But maybe a little bit from each of you in terms of New World and how it's influenced you in your profession.
I was in New World for a year, a little over a year. It was not too long, but what I experienced in New World was beyond great. It's something I've never experienced before. It was innovative. It was experimental. There were a lot of things we could do through technology, like a lot of digital. If you ever heard about wallcast, so there's huge blank wall outside the hall, and that turns into a big screen. And there's huge speaker outside, and just people come, bring their own chairs and blankets and bottle of wine, and they actually watch us, like live streaming. But it's not just like watching just one symphony concert. It's more, is it 360 degrees camera?
Yeah.
It's like, they really get to see each player's face and conductor's face. And that's another experience like I've never experienced, and people would just love. And after all, this experiences in New World, like coming to Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, which is great, and I'm grateful to have a full-time orchestra job, but It seems like, I mean, what we have here is tradition, it's a history, and it's something we have to keep. But after, I experienced all this, it's like I feel like we have to find a way to be relevant with all this technology. And if we don't evolve with all these new things to attract new generations, then there's going to be a gap between old and new generations.
So if you don't mind my asking you, Angela, where did you go to school before
I went
going
to
New World?
Manhattan School of Music in New York.
Uh-huh.
And I did my master's degrees there.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Seoul National University for my bachelor degree.
So you went from Manhattan to New World.
New World, yeah.
Thank you. Douglas?
Well, Angela mentioned wall casts. We were talking just before the presentation, and right when I got to DC, within a month and a half was my orchestra's, by opera companies, first opera in the outfield. And the Washington National Opera, has anyone been to Nationals Park and seen an opera in the outfield? You should come next time we have it. It's great. And just like the wall casts, it's a simulcast, visually and audioly. And we were doing Don Giovanni. And I imagine a lot of people thrown into that without experiencing something like the wall casts would have been a little, okay, they're going to see and hear everything I do. But for me, it was, oh, I'm just doing another wall cast. I was doing this for the last 3 years, well, year and a half. So I did want to say that a lot of orchestras are doing stuff like the wall cast. So I feel very fortunate to have experienced that at New World. If I may, could I go back to your last question with Howard?
Please.
And tie it in. The question being, can someone just sit in the shadows and play and audition? And the truth is, my friends, New World and otherwise, that I've seen be success stories, orchestrally and otherwise, when you're so driven to perfect your craft and perfect your art, it almost comes automatically with this desire to be creative and bring your product to people through a variety of formats. So, maybe Howard's right. Maybe there, might be one or two you could conceivably see that, but looking back on my years at New World, I don't think anyone inherently would have done that anyway. And at the Kennedy Center, there are actually two full-time orchestras. There's the Kennedy Center Opera House Orchestra, and there's the National Symphony in the concert hall next door. And there are quite a few New World alumni in both orchestras. And it's pretty interesting if you look across the country at New World alumni. We are often the ones who are helping out with social media, helping out with outside performances and community engagement.
So let me ask you about that, because that's one of my questions for you is this is for both of you. How do you talk a little bit about how you see life inside the orchestra, and more importantly, how the orchestra relates outside the hall, and how the orchestra relates to its audiences? How do you see that vis-a-vis other colleagues in the orchestra? And don't lie, because I worked for major orchestras, I know how it works. But I really, how do you? Because there's a lot of tension within about this kind of an issue, I think, in terms of, what's the proper role for orchestras? What's a legitimate kind of performance? So how does that manifest itself in your own orchestras and in how you relate with your colleagues?
Do you want to go first? Do you want me to?
Yes.
Well, I will say, over the last 13 months, we've developed a musicians advocacy committee in the Kennedy Center Opera House Orchestra, because an inherent issue with pit orchestras is that we're not visible. Yeah. And so my orchestra plays for the Washington National Opera, but we also perform for the touring ballet companies and the touring musical theater productions that come through the Opera House, and a couple of the smaller theaters too. So when people come up to the pit and they look in, and they'll interact with us, some of them, and it'll feel kind of like a zoo. But and they'll ask, oh, so are you touring with the ballet company? Are you with the Mariinsky? No, we are your orchestra. And pit orchestras across the country are having this issue. And so you'll actually find these days, it's my understanding, a high level of enthusiasm among orchestra members to connect with audiences during performances, at intermissions and afterwards and receptions, but also through social media. Like I said, we have a very active Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram account, KCOHO Musicians. And we also are starting to get out into the, we keep using the word community, but we have started performances at a soup kitchen that is just across Virginia Avenue from the Kennedy Center. And we hope to expand beyond just this one soup kitchen, but they love us. And in fact, we just had an event, a violin and viola duo played for dinner guests. The place is called Miriam's Kitchen. And it was a very cold evening, as you might remember, those of you in the Mid-Atlantic. And they afterwards came up to us and said that we helped provide warmth for their guests. Obviously, they were providing food and shelter, but it was very palpable how the music we were playing for them really connected. And I know the stereotypes for orchestral musicians, but I am proud to say that in my orchestra, it's the exception, not the norm.
That's great.
I would call that leadership.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Angela?
Well, so Baltimore Symphony just had our centennial year. So we've been advertising us a lot. It's like social network. And we've been playing City Hall and around the city a lot. Also it's very different experience between what I experienced in New Orleans. Because first of all, there's not so many younger generation in my orchestra. So I personally felt a little bit not as innovative here. So I just felt a lot, there are a lot of things that we could work on through what I learned from your symphony. But it wasn't, I don't know, I wasn't really sure about this connection between your world and here. But we're doing all this great program called Orchids, which is we teach and mentor all these inner city kids through music. So I know there are a lot of things that our management and Marion and orchestra is trying to do, for the community engagement. But yeah, I wish I could be more involved, for the orchestra through what I experienced in New Orleans.
Can I follow Angela
Sure,
there?
please.
So the question comes to me rather often, okay, there's only 100 players in an orchestra, there's only 90, there's only 60, so what can they possibly do in a metropolitan area? Take Baltimore as an example. So something happens, Orchids is there, and it's up and running. The way I understand the future is that becomes the catalyst for yet another one, and yet another one, and yet another one. And I've watched it happen. Not all of our players choose to leave Miami after their 3 years of fellowship, or if they win a job quicker, they leave when they get the job. And they have now begun to sprout around Miami these training programs, and there are 4. They run under called the Miami Music Project, but they're in 4 locations, and they're not going to stop. It'll be 5, and then it'll be 7, and it'll keep right on going. And little by little, it becomes a music town, a serious music town. Mm-hmm. So you can't change the world in an hour or a day or a week, but you can if you stay at it and you are leaders in the community. I think the energy spreads and the training spreads, and all is to the betterment. It's a betterment for everyone. So just following that thought.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I mean, I think there's no question that it is a I mean, in my view at least, a sea change from where classical music has kind of set its parameters before, you know, and I think that there is that in some sense of our own making, I think in many ways, and I think that and not always to the good of classical music. So I think the question now then is you know, how to evolve and not just how to be relevant, but how to connect. I mean, one of the things, I'll talk a little bit more about this connection to audiences, because one thing that always struck me I spent a lot of time, you know, when I was running orchestras with our audience members, because it was, you know, you learn a lot from your customers. And one of the things that was always so striking to me, and I'm sure that both of you can speak to this as well, that is how audiences crave getting to know the performers and crave interaction with the performers. And they're so amazed at what professional musicians can do from watching them, and they want to know about them. They want to know what's behind all of that. They want to know what they're like. And I think, so they want to be on the inside, you know, and be connected and be involved. And so I think that's where this, you know, the sense of connection and is, and this is people that not just are, you know, have an affiliation, people that aren't affiliated with what we do, but people that are affiliated with it.
Absolutely.
You know, they're fascinated by that.
If MTT were here, he would be telling the story of, or he'd be asking the question, if most of the city's population knows who the shortstop is for their baseball team, shortstop for the Orioles, right? Mm-hmm. I bet most of these people know, and probably even know the pitching rotation from last season, right? So if you know that, why don't you also know the principal oboe and the timpanist, and why don't you know those names? Now what's interesting is that the wall casts, we only do 11 or 12 a year, but they are so vivid that when the fellows go to the dry cleaner, the clerk says, "Oh, I saw you on the wall," or the waiters on Lincoln Road. Wow, you're part of New World. You can build it if you get everybody out there and just speak it and speak it and speak it some more. So it does impact, and I think it's healthy all the way around. It certainly feels good to be recognized in your community for what you're giving, and then it accrues back to the institution.
So I want to, because we're in a music school here, and I was mentioning to Howard before we started today that, you know, we have a conversation going on, very, I think, deep conversation right now at Peabody about all of these issues, and how to better prepare our students for the future, and how to really integrate that kind of work into the real curriculum, what we're doing. We have a group that's working on that right now and making some significant changes. We'll make some significant changes. What do you, when you think about music schools and what music schools need to be doing, and this is a question for everybody on the panel, what do you think is most important? Given what you know about the professional world and how it's changing, and what you know today that you may not have known, you know, when you started out.
You know, my answer is actually pretty unrelated to what we've talked about so far. Do you mind a total non sequitur?
Nope.
So I didn't really learn this until I was on the job. But I've recently, well, a couple years ago, I was elected to be on the board of the Musicians Union's local down in DC. And you know, we talk so much about community with audience, but there's also a community of musicians at large. And I feel like it would behoove the next generation of musicians to learn how to work together. We do so much working together on the job, but how to work together when things aren't going right, or when we see something that's wrong. You know, how do we address it? Who do we even go to address it? What are our standards? Not just with money, but things like the temperature on stage, how long before a break in a rehearsal. Because when I was in college, I was operating under the whole like, oh, well, as long as I'm getting paid to do what I love, that's enough for me, and my passion will pay the rest of the rent or something like that, you know. And I feel like I would have been better equipped if I had known it from music school, you know, what is union scale. And at least in DC, these things don't exist to rip people off, but to actually give our members a decent standard of living, and to frankly meet the high living costs of DC, as there are in many other cities. But so I would say, I wouldn't say, you know, just preach about the system, the, you know, American Federation of Musicians as an entity, but rather the overall philosophy, like why does it even exist, and how can we all help each other out? Because I feel that when things are going better on stage and backstage, I feel it's a better experience for the audience as well.
But isn't one of the challenge you a little bit on this? Isn't one of the challenge, and I have many friends that I negotiated many collective bargaining agreements with orchestra, and you know, many friends in the union and that run unions. Mm-hmm. But isn't part of the challenge in our business that the not to get too academic about it, but the confines of work rules make it very difficult actually for professional orchestras to experiment. You can do it in New World because it's not it's different situation, but for the professional orchestra today, it's you know, it's one of the big challenges. If you don't negotiate, if you're not able to negotiate that.
Oh, absolutely, and I think you'll find as more people are trained with the things that Howard has been talking about for this presentation, I feel as long as people who are entering the workforce have that perspective, mm-hmm. I really think when you go to the bargaining table, you'll see more flexibility.
I agree.
And I am proud to say that that flexibility has already become apparent in our own bargaining language. Mm-hmm. So I'm actually very hopeful for the future mm-hmm. in that regard too, because I do want to see us achieve a lot on these bigger pictures that we're talking about, which of course do mean opening current contract language and seeing what we can do while still maintaining good working conditions.
Of course.
So to make that, to take one step up on a higher level of abstraction, the way we think about it is developing entrepreneurial skills. So any work group, it doesn't matter, size or shape or whatever, any work group has to figure out how it's going to do its work, how it's going to do its business. And the smarter you are about approaching whatever challenge you might have, the smarter you are about yourself and about how you move through a process, the better off everybody's going to be. So that's how we approach it. Entrepreneurial skill is one of the things that we teach. And we've done it a lot more since Doug and Angela are with us. With that, this is a growing part of our curriculum. Mm-hmm.
So what do you wish music schools would do so that when the students come to you, they've already had experience with? Because you're basically the bridge between folks that will leave Peabody or Juilliard, wherever they're leaving, Manhattan, and go to the professional world, postgraduate, often.
I wish our players came with broader thinking, with more intellectual experience, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit. When we do our auditions now, we have 1,200 or so people who apply for the 30 to 35 openings in each orchestra, because it's a 3-year mm-hmm. rotation. Mm-hmm. So you lose a third, you have to replace a third. We don't listen to 1,200 people, we listen to about 300 people, and we go on the orchestra. They don't come to us. We go on tour in city after city, 10 cities and all those auditions. And when we hear a young player who has what it takes, who can play the instrument at this very high level, then the next part of the process is in that moment we say, talk to us. If you had 3 years, if you had a chance to find your voice, if you had a chance to gain far more experience in the art form as a result of New World, how would you spend your time? So the answer to the question becomes part of the audition, and the answer to the question tells us, if you've got two players who are really outrageous players, and one is a broader thinker than the other, we're going to take the big thinker. And I think going forward, I think that's going to be critical for the art form. So what I wish is that we had even more players coming to us who had read a lot, or who had, I don't care, they can sail boats, they can do something else, that there's some part of them that intellectually, emotionally, and perhaps physically is just feeding them as well as just the music. It's not enough to just play the music. You have to have a broader understanding of the world around you to be a great musician, and when you share that it speaks, that the music speaks. So I would want that for sure. I also would want, this is hand in hand, I would want them to not come and say, as they often do, if they went to Northwestern, let's say, for example, they're coming from an undergraduate at Northwestern, and I say, okay, blue sky, 10 years, you get everything you want. What do you want to do? I want to play in the Chicago Symphony. The world is way bigger than the track that leads from Northwestern to the Chicago Symphony. And it's pretty unlikely that you're going to get there. So I don't give them a hard time about it, because they are first years and their aspirations are important to me. But I also, at that point, start to try to pull them back and look beyond. And I guess, well,
And isn't that part of the beauty of this, too? Because I think one of the things that is great about this field, I mean, we talk a lot about the constraints of this field and the challenges of this field, but in reality, with the way things have changed, you can look at it and say there are more opportunities than ever before for people that are smart and flexible and willing to look at things differently.
Absolutely.
You know, and so I think getting people equipped to do that. I'd like to ask both of you, if you could design the perfect audition for your individual orchestras, whether it's including interviews or, you got to go out and do that, what would it look like?
So it's funny, I was just having this conversation last week. You'll have to help me out. What's the expression about capitalism being the worst except for all the others?
It's democracy.
Oh, it's democracy. Sorry,
democracy is the worst form. It's the worst form of government except for all the others. That's the quote.
So I feel that way about the current state of auditions. I mean, there are so many flaws that we all know about, but unfortunately, playing-wise, I can't come up with something better. But I will say, once it narrows down to a few candidates, I feel the orchestras that often have more confidence in their choice are the people that are given trials. And it makes it so much harder for the candidate. But they see how they are on the job and not just on the day of the audition. And I think it might behoove orchestras to sit down and have a 10, 15-minute casual interview with them and ask them the kinds of things we're talking about. What do you see for the orchestra, lead the trombone in the case? What do you see for the organization? Mm-hmm. I can't help but wonder if at some point in the process having that and just see what they're about. I would be very interested to see. Mm-hmm. Because especially coming from a place like New World, but before that I was in the Civic Orchestra of Chicago, and then before that I was at Northwestern, and I feel like from those three institutions, I had so many ideas of what the field could do, what the industry could do, and we're not asked that when we go out and audition. So that would be a really interesting component, I think.
It's Winston Churchill, by the way.
Winston
was
Churchill.
The quote, was the quote.
And I'm not here to spout political rhetoric, I promise.
Angela.
Well, I'm in the violin audition committee as well, so, and I'm the one who had to like audition a lot of orchestras, like, you know, years ago. I really can't come up with any good ideas about auditions. Really, it's like I guess we have to hear, you know, orchestra excerpts. From my experience, there, you know, when there was like a violin audition in BSO, there were a lot of good players. It was behind the curtain, but there were like a few people who sounded like was never even played violin before. I was shocked. It's probably they just don't really have any idea what orchestra is like. Well, you know, it's just that's kind of sad for me. Not because some bad, you know, player applied for my orchestra. It's just like people. They probably just really don't know what symphony is like, how hard it is to get a real job, and how hard we work to, you know, be a professional player, like classical musician.
Well, let me ask you, if you had a group of finalists,
Okay.
would you know, all were really good players,
Yes.
and you knew could fit into the section. What else would you want to know about them in terms of coming into the Baltimore Symphony?
So once you become an orchestra member, it's like we become family. We see each other every day. We play every day together. In Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, we always give trials before giving a job. So they come to play with us at least a week or maybe couple, you know, more weeks. And then we get to like, you know, like see how they play, but at the same time we see like how they like act and talk, and you know how we like, you know, they react with all in this, you know, different situation, and which is great. But I still think that's not really enough to know someone well, you know, and people always can fake, I guess. So it's really hard to find a good way to, you know, find the perfect person for the orchestra. But I was actually thinking that, you know, when Howard mentioned, you know, actually we go to have an audition, we tour, have a, like, you know, to find good players. And, you know, a lot of orchestras, when they have audition, only like mostly like local people just apply. So maybe it'd be a great idea, like if we have like a tour to find like better like players. I don't know, that'll cost a lot of money, but yeah. But I mean, because I know there are like a lot of students. I mean, I was in that situation too. Like audition that costs a lot of money, you know, like flying, hotels, and it's just sometimes. I've known like a lot of my friends, they wanted to audition some, you know, but sometimes they were like, oh, I'm short of money, so maybe I'll skip this one, or, you know, something like that. So yeah.
So I want to see if we have some questions from the audience. Before we do that, I'd just like to ask the group, are you optimistic about the future of classical music?
Enormously optimistic.
I am too. Tell me why you are. And then.
When we started the Wallcast, we didn't know quite, this was an idea that was born during the design phase of the building. So we spent 3 years making the program, which started with the curriculum. What was the curriculum going to be? What in Monday of week 1 and Tuesday of week 1? And you know, we 35 weeks we defined it, and then we spent 3 years refining the idea. And we finally took that to a space planner. And they came back and they said, it's kind of 110,000 square feet, and here are your adjacencies. And only then did we talk to an architect. So it was Frank Gehry, and it goes back to Michael's lifetime relationship with Frank Gehry, so there was an obvious choice, but off we went. In the process, as we were talking about projection, it occurred to us that we could not only project inside the building, we could project outside. We could turn the building inside out, and then we would be able to have a far different relationship with the community. Here's my point. From that impulse to invite the community, we now have a Wallcast audience. 25% of them have not been to a classical concert in the last year. 75% have never been in the building. 35% identify as non-white. This is spreading across all age ranges, from grade school kids up through retired individuals. We do not compromise in the programming. We program for the fellows to start with, right? We're choosing music that these guys need to have under their fingers. Sure. So there is no compromise in the Wallcast repertoire. And we have 2,000 at least per Wallcast. So we have made a new audience for sure and true. And I think it could be done over and over and over again. And we need new audience, because we need those people with us as ticket buyers, and we need those people with us as donors and as advocates. And I think it can be done. I think it just falls to us to be smart and creative.
Doug?
Oh, I'm incredibly optimistic. In fact, I'm certain that, you know, all this talk about, oh, the classical music is dying, and oh, maybe, you know, grand opera should become chamber opera. Or I'm just thinking of all the different sound bites that I've heard over the last 10 or 15 years. If I'm not mistaken, I wish I could cite things right now. I wish I had Google in front of me. But haven't people been saying that for a long time now? Like, weren't there people in the 20s and the 40s and the 60s and the 80s saying that classical music is dying, that we're seeing the end of it? Have you heard something like this?
I think what you hear, the thing that you hear is the audience is aging, which in fact, the audience has always been the same age.
Right.
In reality, but
Right.
for orchestra concerts.
And I will say,
but
at the Washington National Opera, there is the Bravo program, O with a capital letter, and it's a 40 and under program that was just started, and it's seeing a lot of success. And actually, it reminds me a lot of the Friends of the New World Symphony, which Howard's probably heard about before.
Oh, yeah.
It's a similar concept in that it's a, well, how would you?
So it's advocacy. They're donors. They're advocates.
Right.
They're representatives of the institution, and they're young. They're 20-somethings and 30-somethings, and now 40-somethings as they become older.
But a ticket entitles them more to just than a concert.
That's
right. There are also receptions, and it becomes a social thing. And I'm really excited to see where this goes, because how long has Friends of the New World Symphony been
12
around?
years.
Yeah, and so I was there, I must have been there, in years 7 through 9 or something like that. And even by then, it had already seemed like an established group of regulars. And I'm really excited to see what happens with Bravo, because as fellows, we would meet with these Friends of the New World Symphony often. The enthusiasm is there. You know, so going back to your question, it's absolutely there. And I am proud to say, too, that at least in the Opera House, ticket sales have also been great. There's so many things that I'm seeing in my own world that affirm that these traditions and this art form is here to stay. We just need to figure out how to bring it to new people as they come in.
yeah, I think that, to go back to you asked the question.
Yeah.
You turned it back to me and you said, do you isn't that what people have been saying? And I would say that yes, that has been an ongoing theme, certainly in the orchestra world for many, many years. However, I would say when you look at actual studies, like the one that you cited, which is a NEA study, I think, if I recall, there are a couple of factors in this. I think that there are measurable declines, which we all have to worry about. And there's also there's the change in the availability and presence of music education in schools, which is how so many people get exposed, and for the first time. And so I think that we have to look at that as a very real issue. So I think that it comes back to, you have to be able to, I think there's a robust future for it if we're willing to think about it in new and creative ways.
It's a good point, because like Howard said at the beginning of the presentation about not letting fear govern you, at the end of the day, if you just want to talk in terms of dollars, arts or I should say culture and culture-related institutions account for, I think it's about 4.2% of the GDP. Americans for the Arts came out with that study. And if we're just going to talk in terms of dollars, I mean, that's a decent chunk of the pie of our country. And, I think people don't have to be afraid, but when you tell them that they're going to be losing that, that measurable economic success, I would hope that would motivate some people to step in some cases, save the day.
How about you, Angela?
I'm also very optimistic. Like community need music, and it's just like something we can't live without, right? And then, so this world is just changing so quickly, so fast, and like everything is in one smartphone. Like it's just happening in one smartphone. And I'm sure there's so many things we can do with that. I know not everything's gonna work out, but there are so many things we can at least try. And I'm sure like New World is like a really good model, of it. And I know a lot of orchestras, like they're also trying out different things to be more interactive with the audience, to attract new younger generations, and it's just, it's like, I'm sure things will change. It's not going to be the same. It's not going to be always like traditional environment, but they're just like, I'm sure there's so many things we can try with like new technology and stuff, and I'm sure like younger generation will like, once they experience it, that's the key, I think. There are so many people who, it's not they didn't have time or didn't have money, or it's just they never experienced it. So once they get to know better about orchestra and like classical music, I'm sure we can bring them into, our classical, music world. And then there are so many things that we can share with them too. And especially with this social network, like, I mean, everyone's doing Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram. It's just, it's all about, people just share their life these days. It's all about, people want to share what they eat, where they go, what they wear, wear. And why can't an experience with orchestra be something like that? They will probably post like pictures and stuff on their, Instagram, and that's like free PR for us. And like Wallcast, which is great, but there's like a huge sign of New World Center on top of the building. And people, not just like they live cast us playing, they show movies every week, like once a week. Yeah. And when people just come to see this movie, but they will see a sign of New World Center or New World Symphony. That's another like PR also, I think, So, like not just, people crazy about pop star, but why can't we, be pop star? Like, they,
Like the short stuff.
Yeah. We can't always like approach to audiences or, through concerts, through, we have like musical forum, is it?
Yeah.
Musical forum, like more like a lecture concert, a small chamber concert, or through, we can, be more interactive with TV or sports. Everything in high demand is innovative these days, like fashion, food. I'm sure orchestra or classical music can be related with this. Yeah.
We have to be
Yeah.
innovative as well.
Yeah, I think so.
I have one more thought. When we built the New World Center, we saw, this was because of, in part because of funding. We sit on property that belongs to the city of Miami Beach. And they also were willing to put some dollars into our project, and as was the county. So it was $110 million of New World Symphony money, and it was $45 million of city and county money. So a lot of public funding. And so we built this building as a community asset. We will do this year about 90 third-party rentals. And once you begin to be at the center of major startup conventions, and we had the head of Bank of America with us 2 weeks ago, and he brought George W. Bush and Bono for a fireside chat. Once you start to become part of the flow of the community, I think everything changes. So we do 75 or 80 concerts a year, and we'll do 90 community events. And I think there's a lesson there. I think that people are finding their way to us because they come to the building first, and then they realize, oh, something else is going on here. I just suggested, I'm not saying that Peabody or a music school is going to go that direction in a hurry by any means, but I think it makes, I know for us it has made a tremendous difference in the donor base and the audience base, and our fellows are not just playing concerts and going home. They're always watching this churn of people. I think makes, in the long run, it could be important.
Take some questions from our audience, either here or online.
So just in the vein of what we're just talking about as far as outreach for classical music, to play devil's advocate in a way, not that I'm pessimistic per se, it's just I see the challenges that there are as well. I'm 25. I hang out with a lot of other 25-year-olds as well, and even some of them came to my conducting recital and everything, and it was fun. But I sort of had to drag them here, and afterwards it was okay, fine. But it wasn't like for some of them going to a club or all this sensory overload, things that are just in society and culture these days. So as far as like outreach and bringing people in, do you see just certain demographics where you say, okay, that's where we need to go for? And do you just sort of push the others to the side and say, look, there's this crowd who does this with most of their time. They're not really going to give so much of a return, so we're going to focus here. Or is it just broad everybody, we're going to see who then comes back? Like how in my situation would you suggest to go forward with that?
That's a great question.
That's a great question.
With our alternate performance formats, we choose an audience. We target audience, and we define that audience. And then we build an experience that is right for that audience. And then we put the classical music, uncompromised, down in the middle of that experience. And then we make sure that the marketing describes accurately what that experience is, so people don't find themselves there surprised. Then you execute, and you survey that audience like crazy. You take the data that comes, and you measure that against your own intuition, and you repeat the cycle. So, example, when we were doing 30-minute performances, we thought to ourselves, what about the yoga folks? So we invited a couple of yoga teachers, and guess what? First crack, first chance, first try. 500 yoga students with their mats, 30 minutes of music, and then they went out into the park, and we fired up the speakers that we use for the wallcast, and they did a 1-hour yoga exercise. All right? Now, yoga night, yoga morning and yoga night is part of New World's program, not necessarily associated with a concert. But guess what? They come to concerts too. So you have to target that audience. The late night audience, this is all 30 and 40-somethings. Right? And you know that they are in the habit of coming to Miami Beach for a party. And we know where to find them now after we've done it for 6 years. So you make sure that everything, again, lines up right. When we did this, when we started doing the most recent one where it's fellow-driven, one of our fellows, Nick Platoff, trombone player, he decided that he would go for people who had in their experience a mixed tape. All right. How many in this audience have ever made a mixtape with a girlfriend or boyfriend? Okay, you're the audience. You're the audience. So if you know what a mixtape is, and we can find you, and we can say, and that's what the concert was called, mixtape. And then when they arrived, he talked them through. And he did some Strauss songs and some Beach Boys, and he did some, I mean, he made this really wonderful, like he would have made a mixtape for his girlfriend. Yeah. We filled it up, 750 people at $25 a piece. So, target, set the experience, then put the classical music in there, then make sure your marketing aligns, and then go.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and at whatever level you're working at in terms of, you got a small group, whatever it is, I think that there's this notion of defining the audience, and in my life in the orchestra world, we thought a lot about the segmentation of the audience and different products for different audiences, and you'll never be able to do a broad swath, and no business does that if you really think about it, right? Yeah. But what businesses do is they have segmentations of various audiences that they talk to in different ways and serve different products to in a different environment. And so I think that that's the way we have to think about what we do as well.
We have 7 audiences at New World Symphony.
He even knows how many he has, which is exactly right. That's exactly the point. I think that
Thank you. You bet.
First of all, I'm fascinated. What are your 7 audiences? And secondly, you've described this scenario of alternate formatting. Do you also do alternate venues?
We do not do alternate venues, in part because the flexibility, we have a very agile space. We have a concert stage with 10 mechanical lifts. We have 4 alternate platforms up around that stage. The first 11 rows of the audience fold under like a gymnasium so people can stand in front, and we use that rather often. And we have 86 robotic lights and 12 cameras, 12 projectors on and on.
Do you tell your students that's the best it's ever going to be? That it's downhill from there?
No, we don't actually. We don't. We tell them they got to go out and change the world.
It's an amazing place, and you don't find that in most halls. But it's a great laboratory.
It is a laboratory.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
That's
interrupt,
okay.
but
So we have, our guys go to other venues if they choose to do it. There's the Arts Center South Florida down the street, down Lincoln Road, a cooperative of artists. And so there is a whole series that our guys put together, and they go down there and play it. But what New World Symphony as an educational institution brings together are things that are for this venue. Now, what's happened, little by little, is that musicians have gotten clever. They've taken over warehouses, and they've taken over clubs, and they've either for 2 hours or for all year long. I mean, people are starting to do it. They're starting to find those venues. This is nothing new. I mean, we've been doing this for centuries, right? We know about this. I think the difference is partly that people are a little more open to it, and second of all, digital allows you to notify your audience in a quicker and easier way. It's cheaper, so you're not printing thousands of flyers that you may not ever be able to get rid of. So you can choose a spot and a date and a time, and you can go for it. And if it doesn't work, what have you lost? You got the program up and running anyway, and so only 12 people come. You try it again next week. So that's where we're going. So audiences, traditional. Let's hope I can do this, right? Traditional, the wall. Fellow-driven, encounters, the 1 hour. Pulse, late night at the New World Symphony. New music and families. Those are the 7.
well done.
I'm wondering, what do you do with the repertoire? I mean, do you do, for example, does this group do pops concerts? Does it do historically informed performances of Baroque music?
No one has ever uttered the word pops concert at the New World Symphony. I'm being serious.
But they know they're going to end up playing pops concerts
Correct.
when they leave you.
That's right. Yeah, they know that. They've seen that. I mean, they know that. Go back to your question. I'm sorry, I got hung up.
Just other repertoire
I was trying to
or
put the
other focuses other than just straight classical music that they're going to play in the orchestra, or historically informed conductors coming in to do Baroque music.
Yes. Yes and yes. 60% of our performances are orchestra, 40% chamber music or solo recital. The chamber music and solo recital is far more fellow-driven. There's 6 forums per year where one or a group of players will put something together. There's the annual celebration. Right? You can imagine what that is. There's 2 musical exchanges where there's an intense, it's chamber music primarily, but an intense presentation from the players before each piece is played. But it's 60-40 orchestra and then other. The repertoire, again, is chosen. I mean, we make sure there's certain pieces that everybody's going to have to play on an audition. So we want to make sure that every 3 years Schumann 2 gets played, right? Because some second violinists are going to have to look that one square in the eye. That's fairly specific, but you get my point. You want to make sure that there's a Brahms symphony that gets done, a couple of Beethovens, and the most we ever played, we played a lot of new music, and this is Michael. I mean, we're all more than ready to support him in this, but he is driving it. One year we played 25 living composers in one season. Average would be 12 or 15. And they all come to us, either to be in the rehearsal, in person, or on the internet, through the internet connection that we have. And we capture that so that we have long-term those comments. Straight ahead stuff, louder, softer, rebalance please, so that the next generation and the generation after that can get to this hard information that will help them in the recreation of that music. So we're pretty intent on that.
Why not have them do pop music? Why not film?
I don't know. What do you say, guys?
Well, I was actually gonna
Go.
I mean, it depends on how you want to define Pop's concert. Because I did play. In fact, we were just talking about music of Bernard Herrmann. We did for an Alfred Hitchcock gala, and we did educational concerts where we. I remember there was this one educational concert where it was baseball themed, so we did the overture to Damn Yankees and some other stuff. So we do get experience playing those styles. But what's unique about New World is it's not just pops for the sake of pops. It's always, well, it's driven for one of the 7 audiences, if I'm not mistaken.
I think I'd also answer the question. As I understand it, Fred, you tell me, because you've done this far more intently than I have. When you say a pops concert, what you're saying is, okay, you've identified that sector of your potential audience, right? And you're going to go for it. But over time, I think what we've discovered in the orchestra world is that those folks, they come, but they're not going to be contributors, and they're fickle, and they're going to go and come based on the star that you have that time. We would much rather find the yoga students of this world who are going to come back to us and back and back and back. And whether they only are part of that one sector of the audience or whether they start to migrate out into the others, that's what we're trying to do. So we're not against pops. We just see it as not the smartest strategy. Does that help?
Does the yoga audience have a tailor-made rep for it?
So when they come to the concert, it's whatever we choose to play for them. But then when they go out into the park, then the yoga teachers decide and they tell us, and we just cue it up and off they go. Although Chris Hernaki, who's one of our trombone players this year, he wrote this beautiful piece to take them through the last for 4 low brass. It's a gorgeous piece. It's about 5 minutes long, and it takes them out of the yoga and brings them back into the present, the moment.
So I was thinking about it not so much from the perspective of the donor base, because you're right about that, but more from the perspective of the educational experience.
Yeah.
That they're going to have to play, and it's not easy. You know, you play some of the film scores with live film. It's
Pay attention.
It's not easy, or they're going to have to do a jazz concert, and you know, having heard many professional orchestras do that badly, that I've often wished that people got some training in that and learned something about it. So that's why I asked the question really from that perspective.
Yep. It's a good question. Not an easy answer.
No.
I am curious to know how much of your budget depends upon donations, sort of large donations from?
Important question. So we are not tuition driven. We run about a $15 to $16 million operating budget, depending on whether we have any special projects going. 16 at the outside right now. 9 million of that comes from annual contributions. 9 million of the 16. So of the remainder, we get about 4 million from our endowment draw, as a university does. We take 5% of and the remainder comes from earned. And that last bit, that earned, is splits half and half between tickets and between rental of the building. The endowment protects us to a certain degree and lets us be experimental, although little by little, as the lab gets more easier to identify and more, as we get known for these experiments, people are starting to make annual contributions and sometimes multi-year for those experiments. But can be experimental thanks to the endowment, and we must be present and available and in touch with our public in order to make the dollars work on the annual fund. So we are very much aware of our community and deeply involved with them because they are making us happen. No tuition. And the fellows receive a stipend. So it's up to, sorry guys, it's up to $500 a month.
So it's probably a little bit different.
You were about 4.
It was 900 every 2 weeks.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, so it's 450 when you were there. So up to 500.
Yeah.
So it's probably a little bit different model from a professional orchestra where you would have anywhere from probably 35 to 45% ticket revenue, and then the balance from fundraising.
Yeah. Our endowment kind of picks up that side of it.
Right.
Endowment and tickets together. But we only have 750 seats.
Yeah.
So sellout for us, I mean, if we sold everything out, we still would be a long way from glory.
If it'd be possible to run an operation like yours, really depending, well, I don't know if you can depend entirely on ticket sales. Ticket sales, in the sense, are kind of donation too. I mean, they're small donations, but without large donors, and given that New World is not unusual in this respect, universities too, and all arts organizations depend very heavily on big donations, or on a small number of people giving a lot of money. Would it be possible what would the New World look like if it was really purely a commercial kind of operation? How different would it be in terms of the repertoire, in terms of, well, really anything? And if donations from wealthy people are really that important, is that not an essential element that we should be training our musicians to work with, sort of to cultivate?
Yeah, there's no well answer to this last part of your question first. For sure, I don't know whether Angela or Doug did this, but a lot of our fellows, we ask them to volunteer, and many of them do. They write thank you notes to donors, and they call ticket buyers. You know, if we release our schedule in the spring, and if somebody hasn't renewed by May the 20th or June the 12th, then we call them. And it's pretty hard to turn these guys down. Who would have the guts to do that? So we are very much attuned. They come to receptions at the end after concerts, and we introduce them. In fact, I was thinking, Fred, as I was getting prepared for this, nobody tells the New World story like these guys. Nobody, right? On my best day, I might be 20% there. So if I can have a fellow with a donor, then I can sit back and say, okay, this story will be told. And I think that music schools could really think about that.
I completely agree with you. When we put our students out here and put them in front of our donors or in front of anybody, frankly, they light the place up.
Yep, absolutely.
They light the place up.
And it changes then the conversation for our players as they go on into their professional life about donors or their understanding of donors. They will go to those conversations far more quickly. They'll be easier. We're just priming the pump, I guess you might say. But we think it's bedrock. I don't know the answer to the other question. Could we be like the Green Bay Packers? Could we sell?
Well, you couldn't do it with 750 seats.
No, not with 750 seats.
Yes.
We couldn't get enough repetition to do that. We might if we had the wall working 3 nights a week, but we would never do that. We don't, because we program through the fellows, we would never produce enough content to justify the spread that you're imagining.
Although you do have the internet.
You could. You could. We don't, you're right, that's a very important point. We don't know what that internet audience is going to be. Even the smartest of us, even the most experienced don't know that.
Apart from just getting people to come to the concerts and buy tickets to go to the concert, do you think one of the goals should be for them to actually understand the art form? Because I think one of the things that makes watching a football game cool is that I can be like, oh, that's offsides, or there's a holding penalty. Like, I understand the game. Do you think that's should be one of the goals?
Absolutely. We hit that hardest with what we call encounters, narrated 1-hour performance. Second part of the event is all the orchestra floods out into the lobby and talks to the audience. And we've done, Jamie Bernstein writes the scripts, but different from when you guys were there. Now, the fellows do as much delivery as Jamie does. 15 minutes of talk, 45 minutes of music, roughly. That's kind of the balance. We do 2, maybe 3 pieces, and they are thematically related. And the idea is to, well, the bedrock is informed leads to transformed. The more your audience knows, the further you can take them. But in order to be, it's like any language, right? If you want to learn a foreign language, you don't really know it till you can speak it. So if you can come out of a performance as a member of the audience and talk to Doug and Angela about the craziness that was going on between Brahms and Wagner, that was actually one of the most successful that we did. Jamie wrote this beautiful script about the relationship of the audiences for Brahms and for Wagner, and all the clashes that went on, and then she, at the end, she made them vote. Right? You had to vote whether you were a fan of one or a fan of the other. That really got the audience going. But once they can talk about it, once they have the vocabulary, then they are speaking the language, and it's like knowing what an offside is.
I think that's a great question, OC, because I think that there is one of the big challenges for, I think, our world is that our music, the music world, classical music world, is that people that aren't familiar with it are afraid of it, because we've set up all of these rules and sort of parameters about what it is or isn't. And so I think, part of the job of these guys, and I think anybody involved in this business, is to find ways to let people in, and to let them in. So I think it's because you're absolutely right. You sit and you watch a hockey game or a football game. When you understand it makes a big difference. Why would it be any different for us?
I'll tell you that this is a story that it puts a very fine point on what Fred just said. So the facade of this building, an amazing, you come up to the Washington Memorial there, and you think history, and you see the facade of this building, and you think you're going to walk into, well, that looks great to me, looks great to all of us. To somebody who's never been inside, it looks like a fortress. When we designed the building, the very first day, first hour, first minute, we drank coffee. They were our team, the Gary team. And 15 minutes into this, Frank said, okay, Michael, what is this thing? And Michael said, let's start with the front door. Do not design a front door that says, show up at 8 o'clock, suit and tie, sit up straight, don't talk to your neighbor, clap when we tell you to clap, we're done with you at 10:20. Do not make an entrance like that. Create an invitation. Pull them across the threshold. And when you look at our building, it is quite transparent, on purpose. So will concert halls be like that going forward? I think some of them will. I think that it's important for us to leave behind what was at one moment in time, right, the sense of protection, and we were so enthusiastic about this music, we wanted to make sure it had this vessel. And I think that now we're in time, and this ebbs and flows. A time when it's time to invite the people in.
I agree.
So, in my experience in conservatory, people are often, sort of in an insular sort of mode, practicing, focusing on school, productions and such. And then when you get out into the real world, it's really important to be a go-getter. So I'm curious if these fellow-driven initiatives are sort of encouraged by the administration or by the musicians themselves, and how you encourage people to sort of engage in their communities.
It's too bad Nick Platoff is not here to answer this question. He's the first one who's done one of these. So last season, we asked for proposals. We got about 10 proposals. Nick was mixtape, and two of our other players, two of our horn players, came up with the idea of targeting Spanish speakers and building the bridge with music of that culture. So that comes up on March the 19th. They're still making it. So the learning curve was steep for Nick and for Josh and Anthony, who are doing the next one. They had no idea how difficult this was going to be. We asked the fellows for proposals because we wanted them to identify the audience and then move from there. So this was all about us pushing them. Having done it once and having it been a success, and the same will be true of the Spanish program on March the 19th, I think our fellows will be even more enthusiastic about putting in proposals for the following year. But they didn't have a clue about how many minutes, how you pace something. I mean, if we're going to play Beethoven's sonata, if we're going to make a piano recital, I can do that. Right? So I know how that works, but I know how it works for me. But I'm not necessarily thinking about the audience. Juan Felipe Herrera was at New World 2 weeks ago. He's the current poet laureate of the United States, and he read his poetry. But before he did, he said, "Guys," he said, "let me make it clear. The audience is half the poem. You got that?" And then he showed us what that meant. If the audience is half the performance, how do you understand that as a musician, and how do you plan for it? So it is very much encouraged by us. We're the ones who started this, but we have such wide open and thoughtful members of the New World Symphony that they followed us right down into that craziness. So it's been a good experience.
And with that, I think we are out of time, but thank you for being here, Howard. Thank you both for being here. Great conversation. Very pleasant.
It's good to see you again.